Can there truly be global peace as long as humanity continues to teach hate to its children? It's a profound, almost uncomfortable question, isn't it? But it's also the core premise of today's deep dive. The idea that there can never be true peace in the world until humans stop teaching their kids, well, to hate. We're going to unpack the source material you've provided, exploring how hate takes root, how it spreads, its devastating consequences, and most importantly, concrete, actionable pathways to a more harmonious future. Our mission is to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge and insight to help you understand this complex, crucial topic, moving far beyond simple news headlines.
And we begin with a foundational understanding that really sets the stage. Hate isn't something we're born with. Children, in fact, they arrive with this innate desire to connect with others. This means hate is a learned behavior, transmitted through countless, verbal and nonverbal messages from our environment. That distinction is absolutely pivotal because if hate is learned,
it can be unlearned.
Exactly. That's our tangible pathway to peace. Today, we're pulling insights from social psychology, cognitive neuroscience, evolutionary biology, sociology, and ethics to paint a comprehensive picture for you.
Okay, let's kick off by diving into the psychology of hate. What's going on in our minds that allows prejudice to take hold, especially during those incredibly formative childhood years?
Well, our sources introduce what they call the triad of negative social cognitions. First, there's prejudice, which are those negative attitudes based purely on group membership.
Right.
Then stereotyping, those biased beliefs or assumptions we make about entire groups.
Like generalizations.
Pretty much. And finally, discrimination, which is the negative action that comes from those prejudiced attitudes. These three really set the stage for hateful sentiments.
And here's where it gets really interesting, according to the sources. Humans have this inherent tendency to categorize ourselves and others into in-groups and out-groups.
Yes, social identity theory. It explains how we actually derive a sense of positive self-esteem from belonging to our group.
So we naturally want to compare our group favorably to others.
We do. And what's truly surprising is how potent this phenomenon is. Experiments show we're wired to create us versus them groups, even over something as, silly as preferring one color over another.
Wow. Think about how easily that can escalate in the real world when the stakes are high, right?
Absolutely. And this natural inclination towards in-group favoritism can, unfortunately, quickly escalate into more dangerous forms of prejudice. A critical and very dangerous aspect we see is dehumanization.
Dehumanization.
Yes, the process of stripping individuals or groups of their human qualities, effectively making them less than human. Dehumanization serves as a primary motivating factor for prejudice, discrimination, and oppression because it diminishes the perceived moral worth of the target.
It makes it easier to justify awful actions.
Precisely. Our sources point to specific historical examples like the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921 and the Holocaust, where extreme violence was tragically preceded by this gradual process of marginalization and demonization.
A cognitive gateway to atrocity, as they put it.
Truly. It removes those moral barriers and inhibits empathy.
So if that's something as overt as dehumanization, what about something more subtle? Our sources also talk about implicit bias.
That's a great question, because implicit bias is incredibly insidious. While individuals may consciously deny negative feelings towards an outgroup, unconscious or automatic in-group preferences can still persist.
So deep down, even if we don't think we're biased.
Research using tools like the implicit association test reveals that people exhibit automatic hesitation when categorizing outgroups, even if they consciously strive to be unbiased. This indicates that deeply ingrained societal stereotypes can influence behavior below the level of conscious awareness,
leading to subtle discriminatory actions, like unequal resource allocation.
Exactly. And the challenge here is precisely its unconscious operation. It makes it resistant to direct confrontation. It's not about what you say you believe, but what your brain automatically associates.
That's unsettling. So if these biases are rooted psychologically, how exactly do they get passed down, especially to kids who are just, soaking everything up?
Well, this takes us straight to Albert Bender's social learning theory. It posits that behaviors, including prejudiced attitudes, are acquired through observational learning from our environment.
Watching others.
Yes. Children are constantly observing and internalizing the actions and attitudes of influential models, like parents, teachers, friends, and even characters they encounter through media. The transmission occurs through both explicit verbal messages and those subtle nonverbal cues.
So like a child who consistently sees their parents showing limited smiling or using a negative tone of voice towards a particular group, they could develop prejudices against that group without a single direct, hateful word being uttered.
Exactly. It's powerful. And it's a common misconception that young children are colorblind. Our sources clarify that children are acutely aware of differences, but biases are learned and instilled through how adults in society frame these differences.
For example, framing them as threats.
Precisely.
That brings us to how prejudice actually develops in children as they grow.
Well, explicit prejudice, which is conscious bias, typically emerges by age 3 to 4. It peaks around age 6 and then tends to decline into adulthood.
Why does it decline?
This reduction is often attributed to developing moral reasoning and increasing awareness of social norms that discourage overt expressions of prejudice. But in stark contrast, implicit prejudice, that unconscious bias we just discussed, also appears by age 3 to 4,
Okay.
but remains relatively uniform into adulthood.
Wow, so it sticks around.
It does. This is crucial because it means even when individuals mature and consciously suppress overt prejudice, those underlying unconscious associations can persist, subtly influencing their perceptions and behaviors.
What's fascinating here is how this connects to Jean Piaget's theory of moral development. Think about how kids learn rules. At first, they just see them as fixed and unchangeable, like a stop sign.
That's heteronomous morality, rules from the outside.
Right. But as they grow, they start to understand that rules are human-made. And judging something isn't just about the outcome, but the intent behind it and whether it's fair.
And that's autonomous morality kicking in, that internal sense of justice. And that moral progression provides a powerful mechanism for challenging prejudice as children begin to grasp the inherent unfairness of discrimination.
But you said implicit bias sticks around.
It does. And the stability of implicit bias means merely avoiding overt hate isn't enough. Interventions must target both conscious attitudes and unconscious biases through things like exposure to counter-stereotypical examples.
Seeing people who break the stereotypes.
Exactly, and genuine intergroup contact. You can't just tell them to be nice. You have to actively rewire those unconscious associations.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Now, let's move into the neurological underpinnings of hate. What's going on in our brains when we experience these powerful negative emotions?
Well, neuroscience has actually identified something akin to a hate circuit in the brain. It's quite remarkable. Specific activation patterns show up in areas like the insular cortex and putamen when individuals view someone they intensely dislike.
Or even someone who caused them rejection.
Yes. It suggests a common neural pathway for these intense negative social emotions. Our sources also discuss reactive aggression, those unplanned enraged attacks triggered by perceived threats.
The sort of fight-or-flight response.
Kind of. It's mediated by a fundamental threat system involving the amygdala, hypothalamus, and the periaqueductal gray, or PAG.
And what role does the front of our brain, the frontal cortex, play in all of this?
Crucially, the frontal cortex plays a vital role in regulating these basic threat responses. It's like the brain's executive control center. When the frontal cortex is dysfunctional, it can lead to impaired emotional regulation.
So difficulty controlling anger.
Exactly. Considerable difficulties in controlling anger, rage, and reactive aggression. This is where the brain's brakes aren't working as they should.
That brain function is deeply connected to empathy and trauma, isn't it?
It is, very much so. Low levels of empathy, coupled with reduced guilt, are frequently observed in violent individuals. And these deficits are correlated with smaller or less developed brain regions associated with empathy.
So empathy isn't just one thing.
No, it's multifaceted. It encompasses both affective empathy, that's sharing emotions.
And dealing with someone.
Right. And cognitive empathy, understanding perspectives, thinking about what they're thinking. These are mediated by distinct brain areas. Damage to the prefrontal cortex, for instance, can result in pronounced deficits in empathy and increased impulsiveness, contributing to violent actions.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, it sounds like there's a delicate balance between our primitive responses and our more sophisticated brain functions.
Absolutely. While primal threat responses form the foundation of aggressive impulses, the regulation and intensity of hate are profoundly influenced by higher-order cognitive control in the frontal cortex and those intricate empathy circuits.
So when those systems are compromised,
when these sophisticated regulatory mechanisms are compromised, primitive aggressive responses can become unrestrained, leading to overt hate and violence. This means interventions must address both the emotional regulation of primal responses and the cognitive reframing of perceptions, while also considering underlying neurobiological factors influencing empathetic capacity. It's a complex dance, really.
This also leads us to the intergenerational impact of trauma. Here's where it gets really interesting, according to the sources. They explain epigenetic markings.
Yeah, this is fascinating and quite sobering. Imagine the trauma of war or systemic injustice. Not just scarring a generation emotionally, but literally leaving silent, inherited marks on our DNA.
Marks that influence future generations, even if they didn't experience the trauma directly.
Exactly. These epigenetic markings are changes in gene expression that occur without altering the underlying DNA sequence. And they can be caused by violence and trauma. What's truly striking is that these marks can be heritable.
Heritable. Wow.
Meaning that grandchildren of trauma survivors may show altered epigenetic profiles even without direct exposure to the original trauma. It suggests the experience of violence can be, as the source puts it, preserved and embedded in the genome.
So it's passed down biologically.
In a way, yes. Early life adversities, especially during prenatal life, infancy, and early adolescence, are significant in creating lasting epigenetic marks that increase the likelihood of dysfunctional behaviors like aggression later on.
So this isn't just a psychological wound, but a biological one that literally passes down. That's mind-blowing. And how does this chronic stress, particularly from systemic discrimination, lead to a broader societal feedback loop?
It creates a devastating cycle. The weathering hypothesis describes how this chronic physiological burden accelerates biological aging and increases allostatic load, that's the wear and tear on bodily systems from prolonged stress.
Leading to health problems.
Yes, it elevates the risk of cardiometabolic conditions and other adverse health outcomes. Perceived discrimination is consistently correlated with negative psychological states like depressive symptoms and anxiety. So this raises an important question. How do these profound psychological and biological wounds ripple through entire communities, creating a climate of fear as damaging as physical violence?
It becomes a cycle.
A vicious one. Hate leads to discrimination and violence, which inflicts chronic stress and trauma. This trauma, in turn, leaves a biological legacy that predisposes subsequent generations to aggression and poorer health, making them more vulnerable to perpetuating or becoming victims of hate. This cyclical process profoundly impedes the possibility of lasting peace.
So addressing discrimination isn't just social justice.
It's a critical public health and intergenerational well-being imperative, absolutely.
Let's bring in some evolutionary perspectives on human conflict now. What does our ancient past tell us about where aggression and group bias come from?
Well, evolutionary psychology suggests that the psychological mechanisms underlying aggression aren't just one thing. They're context-sensitive solutions that evolve to address adaptive problems.
Like competing for resources or defense.
Exactly. Competing for resources, defending against attacks, deterring rivals, establishing status. This perspective suggests that aggression, while destructive now, may have conferred survival or reproductive advantages in ancestral environments. And a pervasive characteristic of human societies is tribalism and parochialism.
That in-group, out-group thing again.
Yes, the innate tendency to categorize individuals based on their group membership, treating in-group members benevolently while exhibiting malevolence towards out-group members.
Like our brains are hardwired for us versus them, even if it's over something as minor as which sports team you support.
Precisely. And our sources also mention the male warrior hypothesis. This proposes that men, in particular, possess psychological mechanisms that enable them to form coalitions and engage in aggression against outgroups, often linked to the acquisition or protection of reproductive resources, territory, and social status.
So group identity is essential for social cohesion, but it's also a double-edged sword.
Exactly. While the tendency to categorize into in-groups and out-groups allows individuals to derive positive self-esteem, fostering internal unity, the evolutionary basis of tribalism, particularly as described by the male warrior hypothesis, reveals that this same drive can be readily weaponized when coupled with perceived threats or competition. What's fascinating here is that fostering peace isn't about eradicating group identity. We need groups for support and action.
So what's the alternative?
Instead, it requires a conscious and deliberate reorientation of this drive towards inclusive, cooperative goals and away from exclusionary, competitive ones.
Yeah.
Actively challenging the us versus them mentality that fuels hatred and division.
So it's not about being colorblind, but about being aware of our group tendencies.
And actively choosing to expand our in-group to include everyone. That's the goal.
Now let's shift to how hate is culturally transmitted. How do these attitudes actually spread through a society and across generations?
Our sources explain that hate is an attitude and belief system systematically passed down through generations via cultural transmission.
So shared values and beliefs.
Exactly. Shared attitudes, values, beliefs, and behaviors communicated through language and other means. The transmission occurs through multiple pathways. There's vertical transmission.
Parent to child.
Right. Then oblique transmission that involves institutions like schools, religious organizations, even parents' peers.
And horizontal transmission.
That's learning among peers within the same generation, friends, classmates. This multi-directional flow ensures that messages about in-groups and out-groups and the associated biases are reinforced from various sources within a child's environment.
Which makes intervention tricky. It has to be holistic.
It really does.
This multi-channel reinforcement often leads to the rise of hate groups. How do these groups form and what are their mechanics?
Hate groups frequently emerge from a perceived threat to a particular culture or community. This leads to a coalescence of individuals with similar prejudiced beliefs who then aim to exclude and target outsiders.
And they tend to get more extreme over time.
They do. As they unify, they tend to become increasingly extreme and radicalized. These groups employ various mechanisms to reinforce their internal culture and degrade their targets, including unique symbols, methodologies, rituals, and even music.
Music?
Yeah. For example, certain music genres like punk rock within white supremacy culture are used to attract and recruit youth, effectively spreading hate messages. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the progression towards violence is chillingly predictable, according to the sources. It typically involves several stages. Initially, revisionist history to disparage targets.
Twisting the path.
Exactly. Followed by taunting and offensive gestures. Then comes violence without weapons. Why without weapons initially? It serves to coalesce group members and often includes thrill-seeking behavior where the adrenaline from attacks creates a kind of bloodlust. The final stage is using weapons, where attackers gain a sense of power. The ultimate goal is the physical and psychological destruction of their targets.
It's a self-perpetuating cycle of radicalization.
It is, which means early intervention is paramount, especially at those initial stages where a group perceives a threat and begins to coalesce.
And it gets even more complicated when we consider political manipulation. How do leaders use these dynamics to their advantage?
Well, political leaders frequently exploit existing fears and nationalist sentiments, using deceptive or unethical tactics to sway public opinion and consolidate their power.
A common strategy is vilifying opponents.
Yes, vilifying political opponents and gradually marginalizing or demonizing specific groups by labeling them as the other. This process creates a pretext for authoritarianism and the erosion of freedoms, as we've seen historically.
And they use specific tactics.
They employ various psychological manipulation tactics. Widespread dissemination of false information, fabricating statistics, spreading malicious rumors, even gaslighting, making victims question their own reality or guilt-tripping.
Wow.
These tactics are designed to distort information, simplify complex issues, and align public perception with a specific political agenda.
It's clear that new communication technologies have amplified the spread of hate speech globally, inciting violence and intolerance. So what's our defense against this kind of manipulation?
Well, this propagation of hate, often rooted in fear or ignorance, actively undermines democratic processes by distorting the electorate's perception. Overcoming political manipulation requires individuals to develop critical thinking skills and media literacy.
So we can analyze information, recognize bias,
and identify who benefits from the encouragement of hate. That's crucial. And this raises an important question. How do political leaders not just exploit, but exacerbate societal vulnerabilities like fear or economic insecurity?
creating an environment where hate thrives.
Exactly. It creates a feedback loop where manipulation feeds on division and irrationality and vice versa. Therefore, strengthening critical thinking, media literacy, and democratic institutions are not merely educational or governance objectives.
They're fundamental defenses.
Fundamental defenses against the political exploitation of hate, essential for safeguarding societal resilience and promoting rational discourse.
This brings us to the powerful influence of obedience to authority and social roles. What if classic studies told us about how easily people can be swayed?
Oh, the classic studies are quite revealing and frankly disturbing. Studies like the Milgram shock experiment and the Stanford prison experiment vividly demonstrate how easily individuals can be influenced by authority figures, even to the point of engaging in destructive behaviors.
In the Milgram experiment, people gave shocks just because someone told them to.
Yes, what they believed were increasingly severe electric shocks simply because an authority figure in a lab coat instructed them to continue. Similarly, the Stanford prison experiment showed how ordinary individuals quickly conform to assigned roles, with guards rapidly becoming authoritarian and abusive towards the prisoners.
So it's almost like they shift responsibility. Milgram's agency theory, right?
Precisely. Milgram's agency theory suggests individuals shift from an autonomous state, where they feel responsible for their actions, to an agentic state. In that agentic state, they perceive themselves as agents carrying out orders, thereby diffusing personal responsibility.
Which highlights the peril of unquestioning obedience.
Exactly. It shows how hate, once propagated and normalized by leaders, can translate into widespread discriminatory or violent actions. It's not just about what people believe, but how they are conditioned to obey authorities who normalize hateful actions.
And this leads us to laws and societal norms as crucial control mechanisms and their dual potential.
Right. Both formal laws and informal societal norms serve as crucial mechanisms for regulating individual and group behavior, maintaining social order, and shaping collective values. Laws, like anti-discrimination statutes, can promote equality,
while social norms predict actions.
Yes, norms are powerful predictors of actions, even when they're based on misperceptions sometimes. What's fascinating here is their dual potential, as you said. While they can be instrumental in fostering positive behaviors and social cohesion,
they can also perpetuate inequality.
Absolutely. They can perpetuate inequality, discrimination, or harmful practices if their content is unjust, their application is biased, or if they are based on widespread misperceptions. Simply having laws or norms isn't enough. Their effectiveness depends on their ethical foundation and alignment with principles of justice and human dignity.
So they need constant scrutiny.
Continual scrutiny and reform, yes, to guide society towards justice and harmony, rather than reinforcing the transmission and effects of hate. It's about ensuring these guardrails are actually guiding us in the right direction.
Okay, let's shift now to explore the devastating impact of hate, both historically and in contemporary times. What are the personal consequences for individuals and communities?
Well, hate crimes and incidents, whether physical or verbal, lead to significant and enduring trauma for targeted individuals and groups. Victims frequently experience severe mental and emotional health consequences. Heightened anxiety, clinical depression, post-traumatic stress disorder.
PTSD.
Yes, and an increased risk of suicidal behavior. Our sources also point out unhealthy coping mechanisms like drug use or emotional suppression. Hate also erodes trust, induces shame and fear, and fosters that us versus them mindset.
Deeply affecting a victim's core identity.
Profound.
And it ripples out, right, to entire communities.
Absolutely. The impact extends to entire communities, which can experience vicarious trauma. And groups subjected to chronic oppression face a significantly higher risk for PTSD.
And online hate speech makes it worse.
Sadly, yes. Online hate speech exacerbates these effects, negatively impacting the mental health of both victims and observers. And this raises an important question. How do these profound psychological wounds ripple through entire communities, creating a climate of fear that's almost as damaging as physical violence?
And beyond the individual trauma.
Beyond individual trauma, hate, when translated into discriminatory practices, serves as a powerful engine for perpetuating and widening existing socioeconomic inequalities.
This isn't just about individual biases, is it?
No, it's deeply embedded in systemic practices. Institutional discrimination refers to systemic practices that reinforce preference, privilege, and limited access to services and resources for marginalized communities.
Like disparities in healthcare.
Exactly. Documented disparities in healthcare are one example. It creates a self-reinforcing cycle where reduced access entrenches vulnerability.
Let's broaden the scope now to global instability and human rights violations. What's the biggest picture impact of hate?
Our sources emphasize that hate speech, amplified by new communication technologies, is a pervasive global threat inciting violence and intolerance. History provides stark evidence that the dehumanization of entire groups inevitably leads to atrocities and massacres.
Serving as a critical precursor to crimes against humanity, including genocide.
Tragically, yes. Examples like the Tulsa Race Massacre, the Holocaust, and the Rwandan genocide illustrate this horrific link. The United Nations explicitly recognizes the fight against hatred as central to its mission of defending human rights.
So hate speech isn't just words.
Absolutely not. Hate speech and hate crimes fundamentally poison societies by threatening individual rights, human dignity, and equality, exacerbating tensions and jeopardizing peace on a global scale.
And beyond the immense human cost, there are significant economic costs, too.
Yes, there are measurable costs. Costs of hate crimes encompass property damage, medical expenses for victims, and policing and legal costs, amounting to billions annually in some estimates. And beyond these direct costs, systemic hate imposes broader economic burdens by constraining opportunities.
Hindering human potential.
Exactly. Hindering the full development of human capacities within targeted populations, thereby reducing overall societal productivity and innovation. What's fascinating here, and deeply concerning, is how hate has transformed into a more potent, immediate, and borderless threat due to digital amplification.
The internet effect.
Right. The UN identifies hate speech as a precursor to genocide. The sheer velocity and reach of online dissemination make countering hate incredibly complex. An urgent and borderless endeavor requiring global cooperation and innovative solutions. It's no longer just a local issue by any means.
Okay, this is heavy stuff. But given that hate is a learned phenomenon, it follows that it can be unlearned and countered. So let's transition to the hopeful part. Pathways to peace. Where do we begin?
Well, education stands as a foundational tool, a really critical one. It's key for combating prejudice, fostering understanding, and promoting social justice. The design of curriculum and the classroom environment are pivotal here. Diverse curricula have been shown to significantly increase empathy and reduce prejudice by exposing students to varied perspectives.
Like a history class that doesn't just teach dates, but delves into multiple perspectives of an event, encouraging students to empathize with different groups involved.
Exactly that. And classrooms should be intentionally designed as safe spaces. Spaces where students feel secure enough to voice their perspectives, challenge assumptions, and engage with difficult emotions. Educators themselves play a crucial role as models of empathetic behavior.
Leading by example?
Precisely. By actively listening, validating feelings, and encouraging perspective-taking, teachers can directly cultivate an empathetic mindset and strengthen students' resilience against discriminatory narratives they might encounter.
So education isn't just about facts, but about building character and critical thinking.
Absolutely. Education must also prioritize critical thinking skills and media literacy. This is so important today. Students need to be equipped to analyze information, recognize bias, and critically challenge narratives that may perpetuate hate.
Especially online.
Especially online, yes. It's vital in the contemporary digital landscape for counteracting online hate speech. Furthermore, education can actively foster moral development, guiding children through Piaget's stages from that heteronymous rule-following
to autonomous morality.
Right, where judgments are based on reason, intentions, and a nuanced understanding of fairness. This progression enables individuals to make independent moral judgments and inherently understand the unfairness of prejudicial attitudes. And this raises an important question. How does this holistic educational approach cultivate the cognitive and emotional capacities for moral autonomy and critical empathy?
Making dehumanization less likely to take hold.
Exactly. By developing critical thinking, individuals resist manipulation. By fostering empathy, they genuinely connect across differences. This creates a robust foundation for a society where individuals actively choose peace based on internalized principles and a profound understanding of shared humanity.
Okay, next strategy. Promoting ethical leadership and inclusive societal norms. What role do leaders play?
Our sources highlight empathetic leadership. That's a style that prioritizes understanding the emotions and perspectives of team members. It's seen as crucial for building trust, enhancing collaboration, and effectively resolving conflicts.
And leaders are role models.
Crucial moral role models. Leaders, whether in families, schools, or government. Children and adults alike learn ethical values and behaviors by observing the actions of those they respect. It is therefore imperative that leaders consistently practice honesty, fairness, caring, humility, and self-awareness.
And changing deeply rooted social norms is another essential strategy. How do we even begin to tackle something so ingrained?
Well, our sources explain that changing problematic norms requires targeting the collective opinion of groups, not just individual behaviors.
So changing the group's mind, not just one person's.
Exactly. For example, addressing practices like female genital cutting involves fostering community-wide dialogues and decisions to abandon harmful practices, thereby transforming the social fabric itself. It has to be a collective shift. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, societal norms and ethical frameworks act as essential human guardrails for conduct,
Guiding decisions.
guiding decision-making towards morally sound outcomes. Ethical leadership is not merely about managing, it's about actively shaping and transforming these norms and values. Leaders who consistently model empathy, promote inclusive policies, and courageously challenge discriminatory practices can act as powerful catalysts,
Shifting the culture.
shifting a culture of hate towards one of harmony and justice. This requires a courageous commitment to ethical principles and a willingness to address systemic issues head-on.
Now, let's explore leveraging technology for prevention and peace building. What's the potential of AI here? This sounds interesting.
AI offers significant potential, though it needs careful handling. AI algorithms can analyze vast amounts of online content, enabling the detection and flagging of harmful statements for content moderation.
Which could reduce the impact of online hate.
Yes, potentially reduce the negative mental health effects. In conflict prevention, AI enhances early warning systems by analyzing diverse data sources like satellite imagery and social media to predict instability and violence.
Like predicting outbreaks.
Projects like the Violence Early Warning System and the Early Warning Project are using machine learning for this. AI can also facilitate peace processes, analyzing negotiation patterns, predicting outcomes, suggesting compromise strategies, and even breaking language barriers with translation tools.
And countering radicalization.
Yes, AI can be effective in countering online radicalization and misinformation by identifying extremist content, detecting bot networks, debunking conspiracy theories, and redirecting users to counter narratives.
That sounds like a powerful tool for good. But what are the limitations and ethical considerations we need to be aware of when we're using AI in such sensitive areas?
All right, that's the crucial part. What's fascinating here is that while AI offers immense potential, there are critical limitations and risks. AI systems, if trained on biased data, have the potential to perpetuate or even amplify existing societal biases. That's a huge danger.
So the AI could actually make things worse.
It could, if not developed and deployed carefully. This necessitates that the deployment of AI in these sensitive domains must be guided by a strong ethical framework. This means actively designing AI systems to promote human rights, fairness, and transparency.
Ensuring they're free from bias.
Free from political or ideological bias, yes.
Yeah.
And integrating human judgment at critical decision points. We can't just let the algorithm run wild. The ultimate goal is to ensure that AI serves as a tool for peace and justice, not merely for efficiency or control.
Finally, the most profound pathway to peace, perhaps, lies in nurturing compassion and interconnectedness in future generations. How do we start building that foundation?
Well, this begins with the foundational practice of raising caring children. Seems obvious, but it's key. Developing loving and supportive relationships with children is paramount. They learn caring and respect when they are treated with these same qualities.
Makes sense.
Providing consistent mental stimulation, leading by example in healthy habits, fostering positive self-talk, these are all crucial for developing empathy, confidence, and self-love. And encouraging children to embrace diversity and learn about other cultures is vital for broadening their worldview and actively reducing prejudice.
Through things like global citizenship education.
Exactly. Initiatives like that play a big role.
And we can bring in some powerful philosophical concepts here, can't we?
Absolutely. Think about common humanity, which reminds us that suffering is a universal experience. Recognizing that alleviates loneliness and diminishes prejudice by highlighting shared experiences.
We're all in this together.
Pretty much. Then there's interbeing, a term coined by the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, which emphasizes the interdependent coexistence of all people and things, extending this understanding to the natural world, too.
Seeing the connections.
Yes. Our sources also introduce sustainable peace ethics, a framework asserting the inextricable link between ecological sustainability, social justice, and durable peace. This ethical perspective posits that true peace cannot be achieved in contexts of ecological degradation or systemic inequalities.
Vice versa.
And vice versa. Ecological sustainability requires peaceful and just social orders. Finally, cooperation is the bedrock upon which global solutions are built. It enables the pooling of resources, knowledge, and efforts necessary to tackle complex environmental and social issues, and, crucially, for building trust. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, holistic well-being is perhaps the ultimate antidote to hate. Fostering a world free of hate is not just about stopping it, but actively cultivating its antithesis. Compassion, empathy, a profound recognition of shared humanity.
And that deep sense of interconnectedness.
Exactly, interconnectedness with each other and with the natural world. This vision implies that peace isn't just the absence of conflict, but a vibrant state of flourishing built on justice, equity, environmental harmony, and mutual respect, where the teaching of love, not hate, becomes the prevailing legacy we pass on.
We started this deep dive with that profound assertion. Global peace hinges on humanity ceasing to transmit hate across generations, reinforcing the core premise that hate is learned and therefore can be unlearned. We've explored the multifaceted roots of division today: psychological, biological, evolutionary, and sociocultural. So many layers. And we've seen the devastating consequences of hate on individuals, communities, and global stability.
But importantly, we've also illuminated clear pathways to peace. We discussed the transformative power of cultivating empathy and moral reasoning through education.
Promoting ethical leadership.
Yes, and inclusive societal norms, leveraging technology responsibly, and nurturing profound compassion and interconnectedness. This raises an important question for you, the listener, to consider. In your own life, how can you actively contribute to fostering critical empathy?
And challenging unquestioning obedience.
Exactly, even in subtle ways, to help build a more peaceful and just world. Achieving lasting global peace requires a collective, sustained, and intergenerational commitment to dismantle hate and actively cultivate understanding, respect, and shared humanity. It's a long road, but the pathways are there.
This is DigitView.